Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Writers Chat Tuesday. I am Brandy Bro. I am here with my co-hosts Melissa Stroh and Norma Poor, and we have a special guest for you today. We're Writers Chat, where craft connects community, and we have a YouTube channel for you to check out, Writers Chat. Please do that. I'm going to turn it over to my co-host Norma. She's going to introduce our special guest. Norma?
Well, it is an honor and a privilege to introduce my friend and a great encourager to me on my writing journey, Julie Lavender. We're so glad you're here, Julie, and our audience always enjoys hearing from you.
Thank you.
Today,
You have
Julie,
blessed me already.
well, good. Today, Julie's going to talk a little bit about children's educational writing. If you want to try out a project that doesn't pay well, but the rewards are more valuable and lasting, than you can imagine, children's educational writing won't make you a millionaire, and it might not even pay the electric bill, but you'll play a vital role in educating little ones, encouraging them to become lifelong learners and teaching them the value of reading. And hopefully, that educational knowledge gained through well-written and clean children's nonfiction and fiction literature will pave the way for a lifelong reader of God's Word too. Julie is a journalist, author, speaker, a former teacher, and homeschooling mom, and wife to her high school and college sweetheart, David. But her most favorite hats are mommy and grandmommy. I agree with that, Julie. Julie loved being a military wife for 20 years while David served as a medical entomologist for the Navy. Her family lived in 9 homes in 6 states before David retired from the military and began work as a wildlife biologist at an Army installation for 16 years before retiring again. Julie and David are loving his retirement status and have taken advantage of the extra time to become co-authors of a number of projects combining his biology science expertise and her education background to write children's books for school libraries. Julie and David also also enjoy visiting the kids and grandkids traveling from time to time. Julie is the co-author of 37 books, including titles like Raising Good Sons, Christian Parenting Principles for Nurturing Boys of Faith and Character, Strength for All Seasons, A Mom's Devotional of Powerful Verses and Prayers, Children's Bible Stories for Bedtime, and 365 Ways to Love Your Child, Turning Little Moments into Lasting Memories. That is a great book. Julie, we're so glad you're with us, and I'm going to turn it over to you and teach us on how to get into writing educational things for children. Take it away, Julie.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. And this is a newer topic for me to teach because it is one of the newer things that I have that we've jumped into recently. It's always been a passion of mine because I was a teacher before, but it's just something we just jumped into not too long ago, and it really has been a lot of fun. Okay, so let's see if I do this right and get my screen shared. There we go. Okay, are you seeing the right thing? Because I have an extra box up here. Okay, it disappeared. Okay, good.
All
Okay,
good on our end.
good. Okay, so what exactly is the educational market? Well, the educational market includes books written and published mainly for school libraries, but also includes those sold to public libraries and to the homeschooling market, which, as many of you know, is huge.
Mhm.
Writing for the educational market is considered work for hire. Oh, I forgot. I was going to go ahead and okay. All right, now this worked before. It let me hit my arrow button for the next slide, and now it's not. And now when I hit the arrow button, it won't go over. See, I told you I can't do tech. What does that mean? I'm doing wrong again.
Brandy or Melissa, any ideas?
When we did the trial, I hit the arrow button and the next screen, the next,
Yeah, it should.
Yeah, it should too.
But not being in front of your computer, I
I
can't
know.
tell you.
Okay, let me try one more time.
Like,
Maybe I clicked the wrong thing. Hold on.
and each slide deck or PowerPoint is so different too.
Right, and then if I should do from the beginning,
mhm.
but that should make, I'm so sorry, it should make the little side things disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Brandy, seeing her screen there, can you give her any tips?
Okay, that did it.
Okay,
right,
that,
No,
well,
there we go.
tried this. Oh, mercy.
Just
Okay,
need a
so
little
these
refresh.
are some of the books that my husband and I did. And I did forget to say that we write these together. So the top four, I don't know if I'm still there. I think just my screen is. Okay, so the top four are the first four that we did. And then the next three series are the ones that we did after that. So these are my educational books that I did with my husband, and they were so much fun to do. So what is the educational market? Books written for school libraries, public libraries, homeschooling market. So educational writing is considered work for hire. I think I've even taught on here about doing work for hire, but this is a special, like, little niche area of work for hire. But to review, in case you don't know, work for hire, it is a publisher's idea completely. Well, usually, I'll tell you about that in a minute, but usually it's a publisher's idea. The publisher comes up with an idea for a book and assigns the writer of the job of completing the book using the guidelines, details, and standards the publisher mandates. The copyright remains with the publisher always. You never have the copyright, the writer does not. And you don't own it in any fashion whatsoever. But in contrast, a trade book is the idea or the brainstorm of a writer, and the writer retains the copyright. Typically, work for hire projects have a quick turnaround, and let me tell you, educational projects really have a quick turnaround. Why, I don't know, but they just do. And work for hire publishers pay a one-time fee to the writer, and there's no opportunity for royalties. Magazine articles are also considered work for hire, and many book projects are work for hire. My husband and I have done some other projects with a Penguin Random House imprint that are work for hire, but they're not in the educational market. So there's work for hire. The big umbrella of work for hire and educational publishing is just one of them. There's very, very specific guidelines for any work for hire, but especially for children's educational projects. So a publisher will assign the writer a project that's in line with the curriculum needs. You know, obviously they know what's being taught at what grade level, and they know the books that are needed for the kids to have in their libraries. So the first assignment my husband and I received, like I mentioned, it was from the creative company, and we were assigned 4 books, and I like to say very creatively entitled Fox, Lemur, Leopard, and Seal. That's it. That's the title. I thought, could we get a little bit more creative than that? But anyway, you know, a lot of times you may notice that titles for educational books are pretty straightforward with mostly facts about the subject. There's not a whole lot of drama or extra, but yet they're not boring either. You still have to make them exciting enough for the kids. They still have to be exciting for them to learn. So when we received our assignment, we were given very specific details. Word count, grade level, how many sidebars were required, how many call outs to include, how to format the timeline at the bottom of border of the pages, exactly what to include in the back matter, because the back matter, we had to have snapshots. That was additional information about, so like for example in the fox, and we had to have 14 different kinds of foxes, and we had to give a little bit more information about each one of them, and there was a picture to go with it. We were given the exact details about how to write the glossary. There was a learn more section, which included 3 extra books to read, 3 websites to go to, 3 documentaries to watch, and 3 places to visit where you might actually see that animal alive and in person, and an index. That was also in the very part of the back matter. Really specific, very specific. And so the first thing we did after we got all these details and assignments, we then started doing research, lots and lots and lots and lots of research. Now, the beauty of working with my husband, because he is a biologist by trade. He could easily vet all the information that we were researching. And even if you don't have that particular expertise, then just know that you've got to go to trustworthy sites, and you can't just find the information in one source. You really need to be able to back up your information in at least 3 different sources. And you need to hang on to all that information, because your publisher will expect a bibliography. It's not obviously included in the book for the kids, but the publisher gets the bibliography, and that's what the editor uses to fact check all the information. So you just have to do a lot of research. Once we collected all of our research, then we began to write the book according to the specs given to us by the publisher. And though that sounds kind of daunting and difficult, that's part of the fun for me. It's almost like putting together a puzzle. One of the things that my retired hubby and I do now is jigsaw puzzles. And, it's almost like putting together a puzzle. You've got all these different guidelines, and you've got to meet the specs, and you've got to do this, and this has to fit here. And it's like putting together a puzzle. So it was very satisfying to me and very rewarding when we finished and we had met all of our guidelines. So to me, that was just a lot of fun to do that actual part of it. And as you're writing the project, you have to keep in mind the grade level you're writing for. And I've used the term grade level. They will often say, I think we were told for these Spotlight on Nature books, I think we were told they were 5th grade level, 5th or 4th, I don't remember. And we were told that, but what we were really told is something called the ATOS level. And to be honest, I don't even know what those letters stand for. It has something to do with accelerated reader. I'm not sure. I don't even know what it stands for. But the ATOS level, so let me see, I wrote it down. We were the ATOS level for those 4 books were it was 5.4 through 6.1. We had to hit that mark. We had to get into that level. Now, that does not mean 5th grade where the number 5 is and 6th grade where the number 6 is. I don't even know how those numbers work, but they have a chart, and you have an analyzer, you have a tool to use, and you just learn to go with it. So that long thing there, and I will have notes that I can send you guys if anybody wants notes. You don't have to copy all that down. But so that analyzer online is such that you upload a document and put it in the analyzer. And I think the button is submit. I don't remember what it says. Once you hit submit, then it comes back to you and tells you what the ATOS level is, which is just fascinating to me that it can do that. And it really takes it no time to do that. Now, if your number comes out too high, like so, for example, ours was 5.4 to 6.1. If we came out above the 6.1, then we had to go back to the drawing board. And the main places to look were vocabulary words. Some of your words, some of the words that we included were beyond 5th grade reading level. And we'll talk about a book that will help you with that in just a minute. Some of our sentences were too complex. If you go above the ATOS level, it's probably because your sentences are too long. You know how when we write, we don't want it to sound short and choppy. But when you think about it, and my husband had a really hard time with this. In fact, almost every time when he first started our first draft, it would come out at almost 9th and 10th grade reading level. I tell you, we just about divorced over me telling him, you've got to write for a lower, I'm just kidding, lower reading level, because he wants to write for such a high reading level. So we had to change vocabulary words. And the sentences, sometimes you can't have compound sentences. You can't have a whole lot of dependent clauses. The sentences have to be pretty much straightforward, simple sentences. Now, that's for a 4th or 5th grade reading level. If you're writing for older, obviously you've got to vary your sentences. If you come out too low, if your number is too low, it was before the 5, then we needed to ramp up the vocabulary words, use bigger words, and then we could have some compound sentences and some dependent clauses and length of sentences too. The ATOS will tell you the length of sentences. If you've got too many words in a sentence, it will really up the grade level as well. So those are some tools to help you, but that's how you figure out the grade level. And it's very challenging, but at the same time, it's that's another part about it that's so much fun. So there's a lot of educational opportunities out there. There's standard books like the one I was talking about these animals. And I failed to say these, most of the time when you get educational projects, it will be in a series. We were assigned these 4 books, and they fit into an already pre-established series of animals, also creatively titled with just the name of the animal. So so there's standard books that you can write. There's high-low books, which means high interest but lower reading level. Because the reason for that is there are a lot of children who do not read on grade level, but yet they might be in 5th grade, and a publisher might assign you a book in extreme sports, for example, like bungee jumping, skydiving, cave diving, some extreme sport that would interest a 5th grader. They might even say 5th grade boy. I don't even know if they would be that specific anymore. Excuse me. But they might tell you it's got to be written on a 2nd grade reading level. Well, that's sometimes as hard as the dickens because of the words that you have to use. But there are so many reluctant readers and readers who aren't reading on grade level that there's a lot of high-low book assignments of high interest but a lower reading level. I have not done any of those. In fact, I've only done the standard books so far because I've not done high-low, but there's also curriculum. If you're a teacher or a former teacher, there's curriculum you can write, there's lesson plans you can write, and there's test passages you can write. I have a fellow guidepost writer friend, and some of her earliest writing credits was writing test passages, and she loved it. And I think she made good money doing it, but she really enjoyed that. And talking about I had made a note about this. One of my friends who was assigned one of the high-low books, she was supposed to be writing about the Missouri Compromise, which I even looked that up, and I think it says they learn about that in 7th or 8th grade, and she had to write it on a 4th grade reading level. And she said Missouri and Compromise failed from the very beginning because those words were too big. So that was very challenging to her. When you get started, I say this is really fun, and I really encourage people to do it. It's a little bit of a challenge to begin with. You kind of have to do your due diligence. We started off with a book packager because until you get your foot in the door, until you've proven yourself, you kind of have to work with the middleman. And these are some of the book packagers that I know of: Beeline Media, Redline Editorial, Six Red Marbles, but there's a lot out there. We actually worked with Beeline Media, and because you're working with a middleman, obviously you're going to make less money. And you don't make much to begin with, so less than not much is just really not much. But we had such a great experience with our book packager, and it just really worked for us. So how that works is the creative company, they're the publishers of the books, those 4 books that we wrote. And in fact, I don't think Beeline Media is anywhere in there. They get no credit whatsoever. So creative company came up with the animals they wanted us to do. But then they gave the assignment completely to Beeline Media to do the rest. The book packager is the middleman, like a mini publisher. They don't distribute or sell books. They don't market or promote books. They basically hire the writer, get the project completed in book format, and the publisher does the rest. It's also the book packager's job, or it wasn't our experience, to get all of the photos. I almost said illustrations, but they were all photos. I think everything was a photo. So it was his job to line those up. Now, there are a few companies that require the writer to get the photos. I would be hard pressed to do that. You might make more money, but the part that you make extra, you may wind up paying to find these photos. And sometimes it's really hard to find photos. And I don't know, publishers, I feel like they just have more access to those. And so be real careful when you take on an assignment. Make sure you know whether or not you have to do illustrations and or the photos. So because we'd never written for an educational company, we just thought it was a really great way to get our foot in the door. And we had such a great experience with them that and I'll give my husband credit for this because I think he wowed the publisher with his expertise about biology and about nature. So then they presented to us the idea of the editor there asked us if we had any series ideas we wanted to work on, and he said he would present those to some other publishers. Now, that doesn't happen too often. Usually the publisher comes up with the idea completely. Now, obviously, we had to think carefully and think what ideas still might be needed in the curriculum. So we didn't just come out with some random, wild, crazy idea, but we came up with some ideas that we thought would work into the curriculum. So we gave them a list, about a half a dozen maybe. And I don't know, it really wasn't that long before we heard back from the editor at Beeline, and he said that Mitchell Lane liked two of our ideas specifically, and they wanted a series on sharks. And he asked us if we wanted to take on all three series. And he said, oh, and by the way, it's 6 books in each series. So in a very short amount of time, we wound up with an assignment for 18 educational books, a 6-book series, and we had about 10 weeks to write the books. That was it. It was a very fast turnaround. I'm not sure if we'll ever be brave enough to do that again, but it was an incredibly fast deadline, and we had so much fun. We just thoroughly enjoyed it. It was just a lot of fun for us. So now that you know a little bit about what educational publishing is, how do you find that elusive first assignment? That's kind of the biggest part of the challenge, but that's also kind of like a little puzzle, and kind of, where they throw down the gauntlet, and I'm ready to take on that challenge. So publishers get a lot of queries about people wanting to become educational writers. So your introductory package must stand out from the crowd. That's what you're going to be working towards, is an introductory package. An introductory packet is exactly what it sounds like. It's your opportunity to introduce yourself to a publisher and let them know you're capable of writing for them. It's your chance to wow them and convince them that they need you to be part of their writing team. So the first thing you're going to do is research publishing houses that produce educational materials. You might start by studying the shelves in libraries. Now, if you have access to a school library, that's perfect. If you work in a school, or if you're friends with the children's librarian at your children's school, anyway, if you can get into a school library, that's the optimum. But that's not always the case, because you can't just always go walking into an elementary school and check their library. But you can also check out the educational materials at a public library, and study their books. And especially if you go to the nonfiction area and you see like 4 or 5 books, like you might see all 4 of our animal books, then you know it's a series, then it is most likely an educational book that has been assigned as a work for hire. Also, check out Children's Writers and Illustrators Market. They list educational publishing. At one time, they used to use like a little apple icon next to it to signify that it was a children's educational publishing house. I'm not sure if that's still the case, because the book I have is this one here, and it's an older one. I don't know if they've published a new one yet. Check out Writing for the Educational Market by Laura Purdy Salas. That's the book with the red border there. I even have such an older copy that, because I think she did these on CreateSpace. She self-publishes, but mine is just, in fact, I have mine here, but I guess I can't show it on the screen. It's just spiral bound. That's how long I've had my copy. But she gives a wealth of information. And interestingly, the 4 books that we were assigned in the Spotlight on Nature series, another author did 4 more, and Laura Salas is the one that was assigned the other 4. So it was fun to, I guess we chatted a little bit on email, but it was fun to work with her, because I had studied her book for so long and dreamed of writing for the educational market, and then just jumped into it. SCBWI, if you're a member of SCBWI, part of your membership fee, your annual fee, gets you this book free. Now, my book is so old, they just called it the book. I'll tell you, these people and their creative titles, but it was just called the book. But now I think they call it the Essential Guide to Publishers for Children. But that comes free with your membership. And then EvelynChristensen.com, she has a great list of, you have to click on the writers tab, and she has a great list there. I don't know that she's updating it. I think I read something that she's no longer updating it since 2023. Excuse me. But the information is there. And once you find these publishing houses, then you're going to have to study them online anyway. So once you've found them, you need to do further research, because any of these printed books, they're old enough that the information may not still be accurate. So if you found some publishing houses you want to write for, reach out to them and either study their catalogs online, or reach out to them and see if they'll mail you a catalog. I don't know how many will do that. Most of them are online. So, but it would cost a lot to to mail millions of catalogs out to people, but they still may send you one. I don't know, but you can find them online mostly. Study their website, study the books that they show on their website, get as much information as you can about them. But then you're going to need to actually get some books in your hand from the library or somewhere, and study the actual books themselves, and just go over them just with a fine tooth comb. You really have to study them so much. So once you've done all of that, then you're going to need to write some samples. These books that I've told you to check out and read and study and read and study, those are going to be your mentor text. So for example, if David and I had not written these books, say we found one of these books in the public library on seals, and we thought we would like to write for the creative company because we liked their style, we liked their mission, we liked their photographs, and we thought we could write something to add to that series. So then I would use one of those books as my mentor text. And whereas David and I got all these guidelines specifically, you can look at the book and you can see what was required. If they have 6 sidebars, then when you write your sample, make sure you have 6 sidebars. If they have, I think our main text was 1,500 words, but then there's a lot of extra stuff. So you may need to take some time and type out the whole main text of the book so you can see how many words it is. Type out each sidebar and see how many words are in the sidebar. Try to get your sidebars that exact same word count. Basically, you're obviously not plagiarizing because you have picked another animal, but you want your book to look so similar to that book in that series. You want the publisher to be able to say, hey, that person can write to our specs. That person can write to our guidelines because they've proven themselves already with this sample they've sent. So once you have one sample completely done and perfected and edited and you're pleased with it, make sure you include all the back matter. If there's an index, you need to have an index. If there's a glossary, you need to have a glossary. Then pick another book from that same company. And most of the time they suggest, like if the animal books were 5th grade reading level, then most of the time they suggest doing a sample of like a 2nd grade reading level, 1st grade reading level. Now, if you only want to write for older ones, then you would probably just do another one at 5th grade reading level, and you would just say in your cover letter you prefer to write for older kids. But if you want to be open to any assignment, then you probably want to do one with a lower grade level. And at first thought you might think, oh, it's much easier to write for the younger children. Well, it's not, because that word count shrinks immeasurably, and the words you can use for a 1st grader or a 2nd grader and the sentence structure, it's really hard to write for the younger ones. But so prepare at least 2 samples, maybe 3. And unfortunately, until you get your foot in the door, these really need to be specific to the company. So like your samples to send to the creative company to apply to write for them need to kind of mimic books in their series. If you want to write for Abdo or Scholastic or Capstone, you're basically going to have to look for some books in their series and use them as mentor text and do the exact same thing. It's really tough in the beginning. Oh, well, I can't say that. It takes a lot of work in the beginning, but once you get those samples, then you'll be able to use them over and over again, and you've got your packet ready, and so you can use it. So included in the packet, and they most likely won't use the sample you sent them, but then you've got that sample ready that you can send out again. And again, the reason you have to study their website, see, like these animal books that we did, there was already like 20 books in that series. So you have to make sure you know every book in the series. So when you're preparing your sample, you don't redo a book. What if you hadn't studied and looked at their website and you didn't see that Julie and David Lavender had written a book on foxes, and you thought, okay, I'm going to do one on fox? Well, that's not a good idea. So you need to find an animal that nobody has written about for that series. So make sure you study, study, study. Okay, so once you have your samples ready and you know they're completely ready, then you get your packet ready, the introductory packet. You need a cover letter first, and you your cover letter introduces yourself. It shares your professional and writing experience and your writing expertise. Mention your publishing credits if you have them. If you're not yet published, that's okay. It's easier to jump in this market as a non-published person. Although it's kind of hard to get in, it's still easier to get in if you don't have any published credits yet. Your cover letter should be one page. So if you choose to include a resume that lists, a lot of published works, you can do that separately. So then you'd have a cover letter, you might have your resume, and make sure, it's not your typical resume like, my son's in the finance world. If all my experience was in finances, then I don't need to list every place I've worked as an accountant or whatever, because that's not really gonna, unless I'm trying to write an accounting book for kids, and that's most likely not gonna be the case. So include on your resume only stuff that is pertinent to what you're trying to write. Your publication list, and then your samples. And that's your introductory packet. That's everything that's in your introductory packet. Once you have it ready, then say a prayer over your work and hit send. Most of the time it's via email. And in these books that I'll show you in a little bit, where it shows you some educational publishers, they'll tell you how they want it. They'll tell you if they want it sent email or snail mail. There's a couple I've sent snail mail, but most of the time they want them email. One of the beauties, and then you just have to wait, and you might wait and wait and wait. You might wait a long time. It's my suggestion to only send out 3, maybe 4 packets at one time. And the reason for that is, what if you just wow those publishers and 2 or 3 of them reply to you? Well, if 2 or 3 of them reply to you and say, hey, we do a 6-book series for us, then you've got a lot of books to write in a short amount of time. And it's not a good idea to tell them no if you're brand new and this is the first time you've approached them, because it's not that they'll hold that against you forever and never ask you again, but they'll basically put your application at the bottom of the list, thinking, okay, that person's never going to be available. I've got all these others to choose from. I'm going to choose somebody else. So only send out a few at a time and wait. And then maybe in, 4 to 5 months, when you don't hear from them, then send out another batch of introductory packets. Now, one thing that's different with educational publishers, as far in contrast to trade publishing, how a lot of times they tell you not to pester the editor, to give them a certain amount of time. Don't pester the editor. They're very, very busy. And they are. It's not the educational publishers are not busy, but they kind of have their seasons of when they make assignments. So if you missed out on a spring assignment, then the idea is to check back in with them again at nearing the end of summer or the beginning of fall, because you want to be fresh in their mind, and they might give you a fall assignment. And you don't want to just resend them the exact same thing. You could, if something's changed with your writing, if you've submitted a devotional and it got published, well, you know what, that's probably not a good idea. And I hate to say that, but because this is not for the religious market. If you can add something to them, if you've added something to your publishing credits and you just want to say, hey, I wanted to update you because I have a new published credit, and you can give details if you want. I'm not saying don't say that, but there are a lot that might think long and fast before they get you on board because they don't like mixing church and state. I don't know. It's complicated. But I guess my point is, if you've got something new you can add to it, send them this new cover letter saying, hey, here, this has changed. Or I volunteered over the summer in the school library, helping get their books organized. Something that you could tell them that's pertinent for a reason for actually reaching back out to them again. Give them a good reason to give you another look. And like I said, there are many of the houses that if you said you had written a devotional, a devotion that was published, or a religious book, they're not going to turn you away, but they may be careful about assignments that they give you. And then, so check in about every 4, 5, or 6 months, because there may be some new assignments and you just want to be fresh in their minds each time. So some of the beauty, a couple of the things about educational writing that's great. No agent is required. Now, I do have an agent, and my agent has been helpful with a couple of the things, but no agent is required. They don't require you to have an agent. In fact, a lot of times they'd rather not work through an agent. They'd rather just work with the writer. And that's mostly because of the quick turnaround. So there's no agent required. But one thing I will say is, if you don't have an agent, then be sure to read your contract extra carefully. Again, that's another tricky thing, because educational publishers, they kind of have their minds set about certain things. Most of the contracts are non-negotiable. You're not going to get anything changed. You are most likely not going to get your deadline extended. You're not going to get any extra money than what they offer you. You're not going to get more than 2 copies of the book they give you if you ask. Maybe that might be a little bit easier to change. But one thing that we have changed in some of my contracts or gotten out, be careful if there's a no compete clause in an educational contract. A lot of times the clause is so broad that it might say you can't write any animal books for 5th graders that would compete with this book, and then they might end with that. Sometimes they'll give you a time limit. So no animal books for 5th graders for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. It's best to not even have that in there at all, because you don't know what other opportunities you're going to get from another company. I think the one we got taken out completely, and then I think one we just narrowed the compete thing so much that it would have been hard to, have that situation again. So we did get it changed for that reason. But that's the biggest help of having an agent, is they can read your contract. It is an easier market for new people that don't have a lot of writing credits, but it's still very challenging to get in. But especially if you're a teacher or you've worked with children in your church a lot, or even if you have kids and you homeschooled, whatever, it's just an easier way to get your foot in the door. Like I said, don't plan on getting rich because they pay very little. And that's sad to me. I'm thinking, we are educating the next generation. Why in the world don't they pay writers more than that? But anyway, it is what it is. And like I said, you can't change that in the contract. But to me, the rewards are just beyond measure. Because I was a teacher to begin with, that was my profession until I became a stay-at-home mom. And then I was a homeschooling mom for over 27 years. I just have a passion for educating children. And with my husband, he loves the teachable moment with nature, and he just loves God's creations. And so those two things just kind of meld together, and we just had a blast doing this. And it's just so rewarding. And now that we have a 6-year-old grandson, and he almost faithfully every week checks out a nonfiction book from his library. I don't know that he's ever brought home a fiction book. And the idea that he may check out one of our books when he gets a little bit older, because these are 5th grade books, yeah, it just warms my heart so much. And our other 2 little babies, when they get older, maybe they'll check out our books. So it's just the rewards are immeasurable to me, and just very special. So a couple of additional resources. The Highlights Foundation, they offer courses. Sometimes they're virtual, sometimes they're in person. I took an in-person class on writing for the educational market and just learned a ton of stuff. Really had a great time there and learned that. But they also offer a lot of virtual ones. They can be kind of costly, but I learned so much. Annette Whipple is a good friend of mine. She writes a lot of, I think she's been on here before, Writer's Chat. She writes a lot of work for hire. She's amazing and very helpful. And I think she will also, she's willing, she charges a small fee, but she'll help you with your introductory packet if you are interested in more than that. There's a Facebook group, Work for Hire Author Support Group. You can learn a lot there. There's a lot of conversation that goes on. Every now and then they'll say, hey, I saw this call out for authors needed. I'm not interested, but I thought I'd put it here. So every now and then they'll have that. This Children's Writers Word Book is the other book that I mentioned that is just almost an absolute necessity. In this book, it will have, and I pulled it out here in front of me. So like it's kind of like a thesaurus. It's kind of like it says it has word list grouped by grade, and then it has thesaurus. So for example, you might look up the word, you might want to use the word achieve in your a book you're writing, but you're not sure about the grade level, and you're writing for 2nd grade. So when you look up achieve, it says it's for 5th grade reading level, but it gives you these other words. It says accomplish for 2nd grade, ace for second grade, complete for third, conquer fourth, do kindergarten, effect third, finish first, fulfill fourth grade, get kindergarten, manage fourth grade, perform fourth, and win kindergarten. I mean, it's just so helpful. It's hard to, you really can't do without this if you're going to write educational, because it's so good to have that book on hand and be able to look up the ones that you need from there. So, you know, it's something that's the gist of educational publishing. Some of those resources I told you about have a lot more information because there is a lot more to learn, but that's the gist of it. And it's just, like I said, it's so rewarding to me. It's to hold those books in your hand. It's just very, very rewarding. And I hope that a lot of you will check it out and try it out. I always have a few commercials at the end. I think I probably shared some of these same ones. A long time ago, I say a long time ago, a couple of years ago, I was on Focus on the Family about my book, 365 Ways that Norma mentioned. And I always try to promote this because I want to encourage Focus on the Family to continue to have authors like us, you know, puny authors like me on their website, on their broadcast. And the more people listen to these shows, I think the more they're like, oh, we need to have some more authors on the show. So, so this was my first project with Penguin Random House imprint. Such a sweet project for me. I just treasure this one because it helps children read God's word. This is my traditional published children's picture book, my very first picture book, and that was my original writing dream 4 decades ago. So it was so sweet when God gave me this dream just this past year. This is our newest book. My husband and I wrote together, and it came out just last month. This one comes out in August, and this one was fun and a challenge for us. It was a word search. We've never done anything like that before. And we have chuckled about this because we had more revisions for this book, and it had to do with, I loved it. So our editors never said, I think they probably know our age. We've had several Zooms, and they never said, we're doing a puzzle book for old people. They just said, we're doing a puzzle with large font. And that's all they kept saying to us. And so now it's called Jumbo. And so we laughed. The reason we had to do so many revisions is because they kept saying, oh, we've realized that such and such, the word is too long. It won't fit on the page. And I told David, I said, this puzzle must be like 4 by 4, 4 letters across and 4 letters down. It's these letters must be huge. But anyway, so it was so funny. We really had fun doing that one because we love doing new and different things. Strength for All Seasons is a mom's devotional. This was a favorite project for Ravel. That was traditional published. Okay, so there's my information where Julie Lavender Writes at gmail.com. I'm happy to send my notes. In fact, I need notes when I write, when I speak, and to make sure I don't leave anything out. And so I would love to just send you my notes. I don't mind doing that whatsoever. And I will stop share. So I'm happy to send notes, and that has everything you need, I hope. And then I'll answer questions that I can answer in an email if you need me to. But it's a really, it's a fun avenue. It's just something different and challenging, and I really had fun.
Oh, we have a question. Leslie asks about the homeschooling curriculum market and if they offer more opportunities to write for children on the spiritual level, and how do you find their curriculums or the publishers?
That is a good question. The homeschooling world, sometimes they like to be kind of elusive because a lot of times they don't want. We moved around so often. I was a member of a lot of different homeschooling groups, and some of them didn't want to have anything to do with, you know, any kind of regulation. So sometimes they were just kind of hard to find. But I think in the Children's Writers Market Guide now, I think they're publishing more of the homeschooling market. As far as their curriculum, that would probably just take a Google search. You know what? I will try to, who just say ask that? Leslie?
Leslie.
Let me try to do a little bit of research on that. I have not written curriculum. The work for hire curriculum I did was for group publishers a long time ago. And that was like for Vacation Bible School and Sunday school and things like that. It wasn't geared specifically for the homeschooling market. But I know that there's a lot out there. I think where I would start with something like that is like if you go to a homeschooling conference, then I would go booth by booth and I would jot down that publishing house's name. And you could even ask the representative that's there and find out, hey, do you use freelance writers? I mean, that's a great, one of the things I read about educational writing, they said if you get the opportunity to go to a library association like ALA, any of those conferences, and they're held state by state, and then they have a national one, a lot of times these educational vendors will be there promoting their books, and you can even stop by there and say, hey, I'm a writer. I'd love to send someone an introductory packet. Could you please give me the contact information? So the same thing with a homeschooling thing. If you go to a homeschooling conference, find out who those publishers are and write to them directly. That might be the easiest way, because right now off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of anything that just specifically lists homeschooling curriculum publishers, but I will research.
Along those lines, any idea what kind of call there might be for any math curriculum?
When I was preparing my PowerPoint and just going off of what research I did, and in fact, I think I saw that information in Laura's book. I told you that. See, the book I told you. See, this is oh, it's just a wealth of information. But this was one of the original ones that she did, I think, before she actually published it in like true book form. She's the one that said mostly it's science and social studies. That's more what you're going to find. There's not going to be a lot of math, because math is just probably the educational publisher themselves. I guess they have a mathematician that does them, but we've never been assigned any kind of math, things like that. There's biographies. There's a lot of animal books. There's one thing I didn't get into. There's a lot of, I think they call it licensing. Like some of the books that you see that have Bluey characters or Mickey Mouse or whatever, those are licensed characters, but those are a lot of times educational writing that then freelance. They're done as work for hire. And I think it's harder to get into that market, but maybe if you've written for a publisher who does those in other areas, it might be easier to get in there. But as far as math, I don't know of any at all. I think it's rare. But I
Yep.
say that, and one thing they did, one company we were looking at has a whole bunch of careers, and some of the careers were mathematical kinds of careers. So I guess the answer to that question is still yes. I don't know if there's just math, educational writing on addition, subtraction, that kind of thing. But yes, as far as careers and professions involved in math, yeah, that might be a good series that somebody could even suggest. If your specialty is math, you could reach out to a publishing house and say, hey, I feel like there needs to be more books helping kids know how they might could use a math degree or math when they get older.
Good angle. So a lot of times it's about angle, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. So that's exactly right.
Yep. Well, we'd like to invite everybody to come on screen if you would like. And while you do, if you have any other questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. And if Julie cannot answer them on the recording, are you able to stay for the after party, Julie?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Then she can address them in the after party. And in the meantime, Melissa, do you want to share what's coming up next week?
Oh, absolutely. So here, let me pull up my screen here so I can see. Next week, we're going to have Julie Payne join us, and she's going to be talking about how to judge contests. And here's a little blurb she gave me for that, so you kind of get an idea of what's going on there. But it's going to explore the essential principles and practices behind fair, insightful, and impactful judging. No matter which genre you would be evaluating, this presentation will guide you through understanding contest goals, applying clear criteria, scoring consistently, and offering constructive feedback. And it's designed for both new and experienced judges. And this talk will equip you to evaluate writing with integrity, encourage growth, and honor the creative voices behind each submission. And I know that Julie has a lot of experience in this area and has taught on it quite a little bit. So this should be a really fun one to join in on. And if you've ever contemplated being a judge for a writing contest.
Or entering a contest, because if you can hear what judges are going to be looking for, it will help you as an entrant. So be sure to catch it next week. I don't see any other questions for now, so I guess we will sign off on this recording for now. We invite everybody to attend a Writer's Chat Live. I see Pam's waving, hollering. You got a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I had thought of something earlier when you were listing out. Hi, Julie.
Hey, Pam.
For Sunday school curriculum. That's also something that's probably Steve Lawby has in the market guide. Um, but there used to be some places to send that kind of thing, not just Sunday school like take home papers,
Right.
but for actual curriculum. When I
I
talked
know
to
that when I
talked to
did, when I wrote for group publishing,
Mhm,
to actually apply, and I had to do, I think they gave me some guidelines, not as many as the educational market, but they gave me some guidelines, and I had to write a couple of lessons, and I was accepted. And
mhm,
I wrote for them for years, some Sunday school curriculum, some vacation Bible school, some midweek,
mhm,
and that was very rewarding as well. And I always tell people, because I'm Southern Baptist, so, but Lifeway hires freelance writers as well. A lot of times you can reach out to your denomination and ask about
mhm,
writing curriculum for them. That's an excellent place
mhm.
to get work for hire.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. Great addition. And they're always looking for material because they want something every week, which means a lot of content. Yep. All right. So we welcome you to join the next Writer's Chat on Tuesdays. We're usually here most Tuesdays at 11 o'clock Eastern Time. And you can do all the math. And if you can't, go to the internet because it will help you do the math. We have Writer's Chat members on Facebook, and that is how you will find our events, what the next thing is coming up. But we have our meetings here on Zoom. We would love to have you in person. And if you can't catch us in person, of course, we have all of our replays, over 300 of them on YouTube. And we now have our own YouTube channel, Writers Chat. Please check it out. If you like it, you like to hear, and you want to get notifications for new teachings, please subscribe and look for the notifications there. We thank you, and we will see you next week. Bye, everybody.